because they've had so many guys in there. And I do think, at some point we think of, like a man. Men don't have that problem. We don't really lose sensitivity unless you're just doing just some weirdo stuff or whatever. But you don't. And so, when you talk to women, when you hear women encouraging other women to just go and mess around and just have sex with as many guys as you want and all the rest of this stuff, it's like, look, there are consequences to it.
And
So go ahead.
and I'd imagine they'd had to have caught a bunch of stuff sleeping with that many guys. Like, I wonder what percent have something incurable.
I actually had a case where, and again, with these stories, just so you know, just put a caveat out there. I do change these stories up some, just because I need
Yeah.
to protect people in their identity. You know what I mean? And obviously,
Yeah.
I'm never going to put anybody's name out and that sort of thing.
Mm.
But there was a guy, there was a woman who gave her husband an STD. She got the STD from her pastor,
Wow.
who got it from another woman in the church. And and so STDs occur quite a bit. There was one woman that told her husband that, oh, well, in certain cases, this the STD can lie dormant in a woman's body. It can incubate for a while, but she was saying it was years before, and it's just laying in wait like a trapdoor spider until that one day to reach out and grab them. And it's like, it's like, no, no, sorry, you know,
So she
and
said she
so
had a STD that was dormant for years?
yeah, yeah, they were married for
What
years.
was it?
I don't. It wasn't HPV, although that's a very dangerous one.
Mhm.
Um, I think she was saying it was gonorrhea or might have been chlamydia.
And that
Um,
lies
and
dormant for okay, come on. Like
like, yeah, exactly. And when he told me that, I just looked at him like, really, really, man. I said, you don't really believe it?
Yeah.
He was like, what do you? And so people have this thing where they want to believe the lie. And so, and again, one of the things I ask people is, look, do you really want to know this? Is this something you really want to know? Would you want to keep going forward in ignorance? And some people don't want to know. And so again, human nature being what it is, um, I understand that most people can only be trusted conditionally.
Yeah.
There's only two people on this earth that I trust completely. One of them recently passed away, is my father. The other one is my son. Outside of that, I'm not a trusting person. And again, I'm very jaded because of the work I've done. But I've seen too much of female nature, not just from the investigative side, but I've also done a lot of executive protection work for very wealthy, powerful guys, from politicians. Remember, I'll tell a story one day about how I wound up in a political campaign ad, actually. And I've worked for people that ran studios out on the West Coast, and the lengths that women will go to link up with powerful guys is incredible. Like, one of the guys that he was dating one of my neighbors. He was one of Jerry Buss's kids. And so he would tell us stories about how they would have to hire investigators to protect the players, because women would do things like they would bribe concierges. They would get jobs for companies that service different areas or maid services just so they can get with these guys. They would sabotage condoms. The whole spurglary thing. That's a whole other thing that wealthy guys have to worry about. So people look at wealthy guys and they think they got it easy. Their problems are different. They don't really have it easy, though. They're under constant assault, like constant, and it was never ending. And we would be right there front and center to see everything go down. And these would be married women. And I think to a certain degree, some people, men and women, have kind of malleable morals when it comes to certain things. And so I'll give you an example. I was on I organized a protection detail, a bunch of guys in suits, armed to the teeth, for an opening of a certain organization. I can't go into the name of it,
Mm.
obviously. And so I had about 9, 10 guys there in suits. And so I would go from inside to outside. And just to get into this party, um, this really pretty trophy wife offered to service me in my car to let her in. And you can see the giant rock on her finger. She just wanted to be in that party. And I'm sitting there looking at her. And at first I was like, no, no, I can't do this. uh, but but there's things like that. And if from my perspective, my standpoint is this. I have a code. There's some things I just won't do. And one thing I'm never going to do is I never harm clients, and I don't put clients in bad situations. And so obviously I turned that down. But if you're the bodyguard, you see everything that happens. You see everything that goes down. Why? Because you're there for everything. And so women, and I say women not to target women. People will say, "Oh, you hate women." I don't hate women. I've actually done a lot to try to help and protect women over the years, and volunteered to do it. Um, and but most of the wealthy people I've worked for were men. I've only worked for one wealthy woman, and she was really, really rich. Um, but these guys are under attack, literally. Like it's almost like they've gotten their tactics from an intelligence organization trying to infiltrate a network. They're that slick and that polished and that determined, and they just don't stop. And so whenever I hear about wealthy, powerful guys getting caught cheating, um, I have a little bit more understanding because I know what these guys are up against. I had a roommate that was an actor. He was a soap opera guy. This is when I lived in Los Angeles, and like we'd go to these groupie bars, and these women would just literally they would just follow you into the bathroom and offer themselves to you. Like it was literally that much. And I actually had to stop being his roommate because he'd go to parties and bring 3 or 4 girls home, and women would just crawl into bed with me. And okay, I mean that was cool for a while, but I was working. I mean,
Yeah.
I actually had work to do. I mean, I would turn the lights and check and make sure he didn't try to slip an unattractive woman in. I mean, but it's that much is available to guys that are famous, to guys that are wealthy, to athletes. They're under constant assault, and so I have a little bit more understanding from what they go through. But the double life thing, it's harder and harder to hide because guys like me are becoming more and more adept at reverse engineering. And people can cover their tracks to a certain extent, but there's only so much they can cover. And so we've developed some pretty good systems, and SOPs, standard operating procedures, to be able to unravel. Even when people are trying to hide things, we're really good at finding things. Most people have something to hide. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It's like I was talking to a buddy of mine. He's, well, I don't have anything to hide. I said, okay, let me look at your browser history. Silence. Yeah, of course. Everybody has something to hide. It doesn't mean that you're breaking the law.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But when it comes to understanding who your spouse is, you know, the best indicator we have for somebody's future is their past. And that is held true. That's why people have resumes and bios and things of that nature. People want to see where you've been and what you've done and what your tendencies are. That's why credit card companies look at your past.
So, what would you say are green flags for women? So, if you were advising a client, um, like what types of women maybe passed your tests or like didn't fall? Did you see any patterns?
Yes. And so the way the women behave towards them, and I'll use a friend of mine, a lady friend of mine, as an example. Um, and any woman I go out with, I'm going to vet them, and they know that. You're
Yeah,
probably going to be
yeah.
the type of look. You know what? I'm a PI. I'm going to look into your background. Doesn't mean that I'm going to disqualify you, but I want to know.
Mhm.
I'd rather know than not know. Um, but I've got a couple of female friends. I got a few female friends, but in particular, one in particular has distinguished herself from the others because whenever I have any sort of issue, she makes herself available. whereas my ex, she almost seemed to take delight in challenges I had to go through. It's almost like she was rooting for my opposition. Next is, what is her relationship with her family? Does she have a close relationship with her family, not just her brothers and sisters, but her mom and her, especially her dad? And what type of dad is he? And so if you understand or meet a woman's father, and he's what I would consider an upstanding, upright, righteous dude, meaning a guy that's not a drunkard, a guy that has good self control, a guy that takes care of and looks after his offspring. That's a good sign. You know what I mean? So if if a woman can date a guy and get engaged to a guy, like I've seen this where a woman can do all these things with a guy and live with a guy, and the guy never met her father. That for me is a big red flag, just because having a dad, and this goes for men and women, having a dad guiding you, and so this is not to discount mothers or their the part they play. That's also a very important part, but it's a different role. I know people think women can fill the same role as men. They cannot. Just like I can't be a mother can't be a father. And I'm sure I'll catch heat for that, but whatever. And so the father's role is to guide and teach. Like my son is 18 years old. Whenever he has an important decision to make, he'll come to me. Why? Because he knows I will always have his best interest at heart. Why? Whatever I have, he's going to inherit going forward into the future, and hopefully he can carry my DNA into the future. But the same thing with your daughter. And so if you have a daughter, and you want the best of her, and you've raised her, to 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 not just understand who you are, but value your input, that's a really good indicator. And so like this woman, people will call her a pick me. And again, I made a post. I was like, isn't it? It's not a coincidence that women you call pick me's are constantly being picked. And so, when I started going out with her, I met her sister and her brother-in-law within about a month, and then I met her dad like a couple of weeks after that, and her mom a couple of weeks after that. Nice people, great people. If I ever need anything, like if she's coming over to my house, oh, can I pick anything up? You know, and she's she puts herself in position to where she doesn't interfere with my business, but she's always there to help me if I need it. Same thing I see with some of these other guys. And I look, well, how does she treat you?